President Trump is urging his party to do what many consider unthinkable. He told Republican lawmakers to be flexible on allowing taxpayer dollars to fund abortion.
The president said the move may be necessary to strike a health care deal with Democrats. Our medical reporter Lori Johnson has more.
For nearly 50 years, the Hyde Amendment has prohibited federal tax dollars from being used to pay for most abortions. Now, congressional Democrats demand lifting it in order to get a health care deal passed. This week, President Trump told fellow Republicans it may be the only way to get his health care plan passed.
Now, you have to be a little flexible on Hyde. You know that. You got to be a little flexible. You got to work something. You got to use ingenuity. You gotta work. We're all big fans of everything, but you gotta be flexible. You have to have flexibility.
That's a stark reversal from 1 year ago. Just days after being sworn into his second term, the president signed an executive order calling for greater enforcement of the amendment.
Just 1 year ago, we were honored to see President Trump shoring up, calling for high protections. He needs to go back to a year and review his remarks.
It's a red line for most pro-lifers.
Since 1976, the first time we saw Hyde attached to a congressional spending resolution, it has been estimated from researchers that over 2 million children have been saved. They've been spared the death by abortion.
A Republican backtrack on Hyde could hurt them in the midterms.
Republican officials cannot win their races in November if they abandon their pro-life base. Had 1% to 2% of pro-life voters stayed home in 2024, Trump would not be president right now. We would have Kamala Harris in the White House.
And while failing to negotiate a health care deal could mean another government shutdown, some lawmakers would prefer that to seeing public funding for abortion.
I think we've seen really great leadership from Speaker Mike Johnson, from Leader John Thune, in saying that no Hyde, no deal, essentially all throughout this process.
Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Well, senior White House correspondent Kelly Wright is with us now. So, Kelly, the last January, President Trump issued an executive order supporting the Hyde Amendment. Why is he changing now, especially since it's angering such a core part of the voting bloc in an election year?
Well, Gordon, to speak for Caroline Leavitt, who spoke for the president yesterday, she is defending the president, stating and clarifying the flexibility factor. I really got to read this statement to you from her. She said the president did not change the administration's policy. It was President Trump who signed that executive order that you're talking about. And she says that he is not pulling away from that at all, but was actually trying to inform Republicans that they will have to find a way to compromise Republicans and Democrats on the Affordable Health Care Act to find a way to move forward with health savings accounts and things of that nature. But obviously, the president stating those words, flexibility and ingenuity, that really rankles the feathers of so many Republicans, congressional Republicans and pro-lifers who are stating that the president can have no wiggle room on this, that flexibility and ingenuity is not the moral code that they want to follow on this abortion and pro-life stance and Hyde Amendment.
Well, the Hyde Amendment's been the law of the land for now half a century. It just doesn't make any sense to say, well, now we have to be flexible on it. You can have whatever views you want to have on abortion, but when you start talking about taking tax dollars from individual Americans and then funding that, you're absolutely violating their conscience. You're going to be triggering things you just flat do not ever want to trigger. It just makes no sense that you would come out and say, let's be flexible on this issue.
Well, Gordon, you're right. And to be very specific, the reason why you're right is that what this shows that the president is willing to make a deal on certain situations in terms of talking about flexibility and affordability and ingenuity. And all of this is transactional. If you really look at what he's doing, he's setting up things so that he can win the midterms. But to the point of that report, a lot of pro-lifers will sit on the sidelines if the president really pushes this. And we saw the White House yesterday begin to push back on what the president was saying, trying to clarify that he was not in any way trying to amend the Hyde Amendment. I think they need to be very clear about where they stand on this issue, just as he was last year when he opened up his administration for his presidency and was really firm in supporting the Hyde Amendment.
All right. Well, Kelly, thanks for your insights. In other news, and this is just absolutely incredible to me, what's happening out of Minneapolis. There's been a firestorm, obviously, of a protest after an ICE agent killed a 37-year-old mother. John Jessup has that story and more from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
Thanks, Gordon. And those protests are also spreading to other cities. According to the Department of Homeland Security, 37-year-old Renee Good used her vehicle as a weapon, allegedly trying to ram a federal agent. The agent fired several shots, killing her. DHS Secretary Kristi Noem called the shooting self-defense. Mayor Jacob Fry of Minneapolis disagrees.
Other officers around him and the safety of the public fired defensive shots.
They are already trying to spin this as an action of self-defense. Having seen the video of myself, I want to tell everybody directly, that is bull.
ICE is ramping up operations in Minneapolis with thousands of federal officers deployed. Well, U.S. forces seized 2 tankers suspected in sanctioned oil shipments from Venezuela. Near the Caribbean, the U.S. Coast Guard boarding the Sophia to commandeer the vessel. In the North Atlantic, U.S. forces seized the Bella 1. The tanker has been on the run for weeks, at one point painting a Russian flag on its side and changing its registration. Moscow is now demanding the crew be released. The Trump administration has announced a plan for Venezuela's future, including selling 50 million barrels of Venezuelan oil and lifting restrictions to give American companies and others access to Venezuela's oil market. Meanwhile, House Speaker Mike Johnson is speaking out on President Trump's push to acquire Greenland. The administration has even said military force is a possibility. The speaker pushed back, saying, quote, "I don't think anybody is seriously considering that. In the Congress, we're certainly not." Well, this week marks 70 years since a defining moment in modern missions, the death of 5 young missionaries in Ecuador. Their story of sacrifice sparked a movement that's still bearing fruit today. CBN's Brady Carter explains.
Anyone from Palm Beach, Marge? Over. Chalmetta standing by. No word as yet. We'll be standing by.
In 1956, 5 missionaries flew deep into the jungle of Ecuador, hoping to share the gospel via sign language with an indigenous tribe called Waodani, formerly called the Aucas, meaning savages. Their pilot, Nate Saint, landed on a sandbar near the village to make personal contact. It wasn't long, however, before the tribe turned violent.
I could see he had a big spear here and it was in backwards. He did have a cut over his eye.
Operation Auca became a landmark story of martyrdom. Nate Saint, Jim Elliott, Ed McCauley, Roger Udarian, and Pete Fleming, all speared to death by tribesmen. Their bodies found nearby in a river by a search party.
This event, people have called the most significant event in the 20th century in missions.
Gene Jordan, a longtime pilot with Mission Aviation Fellowship, the same organization that flew the men to Ecuador. Jordan remembers growing up alongside the children of the martyrs. He recalls their story sparking a wildfire in the mission field and in his own calling.
I've heard many people say that I am in the ministry because of that story, because of the dedication of those 5 men to give of their lives so that others might hear about a God creator and his son that came to die for them.
While the family suffered a tragic loss, their deaths became a seed that would eventually grow in the hearts of indigenous people groups worldwide.
So many people focused on my grandfather's death. Our focus is not his death, but what his death led to, which was the gospel going to the Waodani people.
In a twist only faith could write, the widows and a sister of the martyrs returned to the same jungle to finish the work of sharing the gospel. This is actual footage of the Waodani men responsible for the killings being baptized by Phil Saint, Nate Saint's brother, in the same river their bodies were found.
And so when you look at what our mission here on earth to do is to make disciples everywhere.
Today, Jamie Saint, Nate's grandson, oversees iTech, the Indigenous Peoples Technology and Education Center founded by his father. The center provides Indigenous groups with healthcare, farming, and mechanical training, along with the gospel.
When we've done training in more than 70 countries, this year we trained about 500 people in 38 trainings, somewhere between 35 and 40 tribes.
What began in violence became transformed by forgiveness and faith. And the work begun on that riverbank still equips believers worldwide. Brody Carter, CBN News.
Such an inspiring story of redemption and hope. Gordon?
And such a landmark in American missionary history, inspired a whole generation to follow in their footsteps, that if they could sacrifice their lives in trying to reach the unreached with the gospel of Jesus Christ, what can I do? In the story, one of the Alka warriors who killed them said that he saw them go to heaven. He said, I saw them jump the boa, is the term he used, and it has echoes of St. Stephen as he's being stoned to death. He sees heaven open before him, and Jesus standing to receive him into heaven. It's an incredible story and an incredible mission. No greater love than this, than to lay down your life. And here you are laying down your life, not for someone you know, but someone you're trying to reach with the gospel. At the end of this story, that tribe converted because of what that warrior saw as those missionaries were ushered into heaven. He's killing them, and he's seeing what happens to them, and he's saying, I want that too. That tribe became Christian because of that moment on that beach so long ago. Let's resolve that in our generation, we'll finish the Great Commission. I literally see it possible for us to do it. The technology is there. Now, are we willing? Are we willing to be used? The psalmist said so long ago, your people will be willing in the day of your power. Let us all be as willing as Nate to say, yes, I'll lay down my life.